Hi, Betty. You know what? We last week had a little bit of fun thinking about a woman that I've always wanted to tell you about. Esther. And I want to tell you more because last week we said we were going to talk about her, but now I'm going to tell you more about her. But I think what's really fun is we have Nana here. Nana's doing some technical work here today. So let's ask Nana if there's a movie that we've ever heard of, Nana, that is worth recommending to the people. I think there is. It's called One Night with the King. One Night with the King. And I want to tell you something else. I want to put in a little plug. A friend of ours wrote the music.
Yes.
That's right. And so if you have a chance to see that movie, everybody, after having heard the story today, then get back to us, tell us what you think about the movie. But today we're going right into the book, and here it is. So, Betty, in the last chapter, we could already see that there was a problem brewing. Queen Vashti had disobeyed her husband, King Xerxes of Babylon and of the Persians. And he began looking for a new queen. As the word went out that he was looking for a new queen, people noticed that there was a big problem, though, because there was a beautiful woman who was also very, very smart, and her name was Hadassah, but she was also called Esther, because it's not uncommon back then to have two separate names. One that you have where you live, and the other one is really part of your religious name. Now, there was a big problem because, you see, Esther and her uncle Mordecai were both Jews, and hardly anyone knew it because the people in the area just knew that they were good people. Besides, if people there had known that they were Jews, Esther and Mordecai might have been persecuted. So, the king started collecting young women from all around his country, and they came to live in his palace. And since they all lived together, well, this is what is called when a group of women live together like this. It was called a harem. Harem. Sorry, everybody. There was a very difficult woman named Haggai. Now, Haggai and the king were talking about it, and the fact that he's looking for a new queen. So he put her in charge of bringing all these young women together and taking them to the palace. But right away from the very beginning, it was very clear that the king was really interested in Esther. Of course, Uncle Mordecai was very concerned about his niece Esther, because you may remember that since she was an orphan, as we talked about last week, he had raised her as if she were his own child. So, every day, he would walk by the palace and see if she was doing well. But life was really difficult for the ladies back then. And even before Mary Kay products were invented, all of these ladies had to have 12 months of beauty treatments, including oil of myrrh and perfume and lots of makeup.
How do they make the makeup?
They made it from the natural things that they had in the soil and in their plants that they had in that country. Now, it was pretty bad because these poor ladies took turns spending the night with the king. Now, he did give them gifts, but giving someone something in exchange for what he wanted really wasn't so nice, was it? Well, when it was Esther's turn to spend a night with the king, he decided she was so terrific. He went ahead and put a royal crown on her head and made her the new queen right away.
Who? Esther?
Esther. Then he threw a big party, and he even made a national holiday so no one had to go to work and the children didn't have to go to school. Now, that's been a rough week for you with that, because here in Texas, we've had a lot of what this week?
Snow.
A lot of snow.
And the power has been going.
Yeah, and with you had how many days where you didn't have much power?
I think around 3 days.
About 3 days.
But
Was it pretty cold in your house?
Yes.
How did you keep warm?
Blankets.
Yeah. I guess we're really wanting to say thank you to everybody out there. I just got a call, and I'm a few minutes late because a friend of ours from London, England called to see how we were doing. He's been worried about us reading all the news. Well, one day, while Uncle Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, he overheard two of the king's officers saying nasty things about the king, and they wanted to kill the king. So Mordecai went to his niece Queen Esther and told her what he had overheard. Esther told the king that Uncle Mordecai had told her what he had overheard. And when the king found out what was said was really true, well, there was a hanging party for the two guards. Do you know what a hanging party would mean for the two guards?
I know what it is, but I
don't want to say it. I don't
want to guess.
But life isn't always easy for religious people.
Wait, why would they do that to the guards?
Because those two guards were plotting to kill the king. And Mordecai overheard them, and he didn't want the king to be killed. So when a new royal official was named to create laws, he told everyone that they had to kneel down and honor him. Well, Jews can't do that. But now Mordecai was in big trouble. When this royal official, whose name was Haman, discovered that Mordecai was a Jew and he would not kneel down before Haman, he decided it would be better to kill all of the Jews in the kingdom, not just Mordecai. So, when Haman told King Xerxes that it would be best to kill all the Jews in the kingdom, sadly, the king agreed. So, a particular day was picked, and to celebrate it, King Xerxes and Haman sat down and had a big drinking party. But the second that Mordecai heard about this massacre that was to take place, guess what? He tore his clothes, he put on ashes. That's right, you know the drill, you know how it happens now. Well, the word got to Esther. And now that she's the new queen, she was really upset. She even sent a new change of clothes to her uncle, but he would not accept them nor wear them. But she sent one of her servants out to find Mordecai to find out what he had to say about the massacre was planned. Mordecai told the servant to ask Esther if she would go to the king and ask for mercy for the Jewish people. You know, like at Mass, what do we do at the beginning of Mass? We say, Lord, have mercy upon us, right? Now, there's a problem. No one was allowed to go directly to the king. You couldn't walk up and just say, hey, king, I want to talk with you. No, sir. You had to be invited first.
You can't, I don't think you can even talk to the king or queen. You can't just go up to the palace and say, hey, can I talk to
It's
royalty?
true. When Nana and I were at Buckingham Palace for tea, and the queen was there, and her royal family were all there, we couldn't just run up to the queen and say, hey, queen. The only exception, though, was if the king offered a special golden scepter, and then that would mean everything was forgiven. Well, sir, Mordecai wanted all the Jewish people to be spared, and Esther thought about it and told Mordecai to gather the Jewish people to fast. You know what that means? Don't eat. Yeah. Pray for 3 days. And then 3 days, no food. And they'd be praying.
And pray every minute?
Non-stop.
Every second?
Not every second. You could take a few breaks. Prayer break. And then she would approach the king even if he did not ask for her. So after 3 days, when the king saw Queen Esther all decked out in her queen's robes, he couldn't help himself. So he offered his golden scepter to her.
Thank you.
And Esther then approached him. Well, the king thought that she looked great, and he loved her so much that he said to her, "What's up, Queen Esther? What would you like? I'll give you whatever you want." Well, what she then said was, "I simply want you and Haman to come to a fancy meal that I have prepared." Well, midway through the meal, the king once again asked Queen Esther what she wanted. By now, they were enjoying the wine. You understand that, right? Yeah. You won't believe what she said. She invited the king and Haman back again for another fancy meal the next night. That's what she wanted. But that day, Haman saw Mordecai. And you can imagine what didn't happen. That's right. Mordecai would not kneel or bow or do anything that would show that he saw Haman as being more special than God. That's not what a Jew would do. We only kneel, right, everybody? We only take a knee for Jesus. We kneel for God. Well, Haman had had such a good time at the palace and was bragging about how important he was that he decided not to do anything to Mordecai. After all this bragging, he then complained to his wife and his friends about Mordecai. And Haman's wife said, "Tell you what, next day, why don't you hang that man?" Another hanging party.
Is it like you just have like this thing and then you tie a rope to it and then...
They call that the gallows. That's right. What's that face look like when they hang them? Yeah, that's right. Well, Haman loved the idea. That night the king couldn't sleep, so he had one of his servants read to him from the book all about recent history in his kingdom. And he listened carefully to the part that told about Mordecai turning into two guards. Remember that story? He turned into two guards because they were going to kill him? Well, he says, wait a minute. King Xerxes then asked, what was that man's name? They said Mordecai. Well, he said, did anybody throw a big party to honor Mordecai for what he's done to save me? But guess what? Just as King Xerxes was planning a big party to honor Mordecai, Haman was waiting to talk with the king about hanging Mordecai. So the king wanted a party, Haman wanted a hanging party. Not good.
Nobody wants a hanging party. Who wants a hanging party? So they're going to sit there and be like,
That's right. That's right.
And nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
Not at all.
And it does, when somebody said they're just hanging out, that's not what it means. Well, when the king was talking with Haman about all things that should be done to honor someone, Haman thought that the king was talking about honoring him. Haman said, he's talking about me. So can you imagine what happened? Instead of hanging Mordecai, Haman had to go and treat Mordecai like a national hero. He wanted to kill him, but he couldn't because the king liked him. Well, Haman went home, and his wife and friends couldn't believe what had happened. Haman's wife told him to be careful. And then the king's servants arrived to take Haman to the big banquet that Queen Esther had planned for the second night in a row.
Let's go to the banquet.
Amen. Let's go.
Let's
Once
have
again,
some soup.
while they were drinking some wine, King Xerxes asked Queen Esther what she wanted. She told him that she could understand why her people might be treated like slaves, but that she could not understand why they all had to be killed. All the men, the women, and the children, just because they were Jewish. The king was not happy. And he asked his wife, the queen, he said, what man would do such a terrible thing like that? And Queen Esther then turned to Haman, who was sitting there with him, and she said, this is the man that would do such a nasty thing. Can you imagine that the king was not happy? And he even left the room all worked up, while Haman started begging for Queen Esther to spare his life, since he could see how upset the king was, and he figured what was coming up next. Another, what kind of a party?
hanging
party.
We're
Well,
gonna all hang out,
that's-
except and when they get there, they're gonna be like,
That's right. Oh my
"Where's
goodness.
the building?"
Not what you would like to do. No. Well,
And then later,
that's it. So here's the king. He's out in the garden, walking around, worked up and upset. Queen Esther is on the couch like this, Betty. Kind of resting on the couch.
yeah, that's what I did.
Now, Hammond knows what's happening next. So he starts walking around, running around in the room where Esther was, and he tripped. And guess what?
What?
He fell on top of her. And when the king walked in, and he saw that
Oh no.
Hammond was lying on top of his wife, he was not a very happy man. There was Hammond lying on top of Queen Esther. He says to him, "You're going to dishonor her too?" Then a guard came in. And do you remember that Hammond wanted to hang Mordecai?
Yes.
Well, guess what happened?
What happened?
Yep. Hammond was the one who had the noose put around his neck. And he was the one who hanged that day, not Mordecai. Now, if that wasn't bad enough for Hammond and his family. Yeah.
Being hanged.
I know, Hammond, there he was hanging. Now, the next thing that happens is, it gets worse for Hammond and his family. Because then the king went and got everything that Hammond had ever owned. His house, his money, his pets,
His shoes.
his everything.
His underpants.
Everything, yeah. And he turned everything that Hammond had owned and gave it to Esther.
I don't think she
And
want
then
that.
she explained to the
I don't
king.
think she'd want his underpants.
I think she probably wouldn't, but guess what happens?
What?
What happens next is Esther then explained to the king, Xerxes, that it was really Mordecai, her uncle, who had done all the things that made it possible for the king to be protected. So she handed over everything to Mordecai. And so you can see what you just talked about. Mordecai could use those, couldn't he? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So then the king even handed over a special ring, kind of like a bishop's ring.
Like yours?
Yeah, like mine's kind of like a ring. I use this ring for certain things as a bishop. Sometimes you see people kiss my ring, and sometimes you see me do special acts. Well, it's a ring that is important, and the king had one, and he gave over his ring to Mordecai, kind of like a bonus. And what's important about this bonus gift, that Mordecai could write down the new laws for the people, and all he had to do was take the ring that was given to him and put it down on there, and it meant anything I've written
Down.
is now, that's right, it's now official from the king. Well, these laws then went out to 127 provinces in the kingdom. And they were all told that the Jewish people were not allowed to be mistreated anymore. The king even gave Mordecai a really fancy outfit to wear so people could look at him and say, whoa, now that is one important fellow. In no time at all, everyone had great respect for Mordecai. Some places, especially where the people had mistreated the Jewish people, well, they were afraid if they were not nice to the Jewish people, that the Jewish people might attack them. In fact, some of the non-Jewish residents of the provinces even became Jewish over this. Sadly, the fighting continued, and one day, a report went to the king that about the battles,
Oh, yeah.
and he told the queen, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Hammon just in this city alone. So I wonder what they've done throughout our kingdom. Then he said to Esther, now, what would you like? I'll give it to you. Esther wanted more protection for her people. once all of this battling was over, they had days of celebration, and to this very day, Betty,
What?
it is a holy day for Jewish people called Purim, Purim, when they celebrate the defeat of Haman's plot to massacre the Jews. In fact, it's a 2-day celebration. So, you see, Esther's a real hero, or as we sometimes say, heroine, for the Jewish people.
Well,
and at least
if Esther is a hero, she's a shero because it's hero.
Oh.
And then shero.
Everybody out there, I think we've invented a new word in
No,
this age.
It's been used.
It's been used?
Yes,
So we
it's
have
been
heroes and sheroes now.
Yes.
Thank you,
It's
honey.
been used.
You know what? Every week I learn more. So, these 2 days are celebrated every springtime. In fact, Mordecai made certain that everything that happened was written in a book. And he also told everyone to exchange gifts, especially food, have special meals, and give gifts to the poor.
What's next? Oh,
So, Queen Esther and her uncle Mordecai made sure that everything about the Feast of Purim be written down. And they made sure that what was written was sent to every province in the kingdom of Xerxes. In fact, King Xerxes made sure that no one forget how important Purim was. And it was written in the book of the kings of Media, or as they say, the Medes and the Persians, that Mordecai the Jew was second in command in the kingdom and loved as the most important Jewish person in the kingdom because he worked for the good of his own people who were in exile. And that he spoke up for the welfare of all the Jewish people. But you and I know that it would not have been possible without God's grace and the way in which he blessed Esther, the queen, with beauty and wisdom. So, how are we going to end it today, Betty?
Okay, what I would like to tell you is that the Jewish people never had any more problems. But that's not true. And I would like to tell you that as long as you are a good person, you will never have any trouble. But that is also not true. So, in the next chapter, we are going to find out about a man who was Jewish, who was good and faithful and still had a miserable life, while not losing his faith to his job.
He was a man who never lost his faith,
or job.
And his name is Job.
Oh, okay.
Job. So you ready for Job next week?
Yeah.
Read up on it, folks. And by the way, if you have a chance to be able to look at One Night with the King, look for the name J.A.C. Redford and say, hey, I know who that is. He's a friend of the Ackerman family. Yay. In fact, guess what? I'll let you in on a little secret. He also wrote the music for Little Mermaid. Yep, and he also wrote the music for a couple of other really important movies. And I confirmed him. Yay! God bless everybody. Have a wonderful day. And we'll see you again next week.
Bye-bye.